Hey everyone, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're at. My name is Chris Bennett. I'm a teacher with Blockchain Training Alliance, and I want to thank you for joining us this morning. We've got some great web series going throughout this week for kids. So yesterday, we talked about blockchain. What is blockchain? Why is it such an important technology? Why is it so important, especially right now? And today we're going to talk about another technology that has a lot of people really excited. We're going to talk about IoT, or the Internet of Things. So let's go ahead and dive in and get started because we have a lot to talk about. And this is a really, really exciting subject. So IoT, as I just mentioned, stands for the Internet of Things. And you'll sometimes hear this talked about as a world of smart devices or a world of connected devices. But the idea is pretty simple. There are only two types of users on the internet. A user can either be a human being like you or I, sending an email to somebody, communicating, joining a web meeting like this, and talking back and forth. The other type of user on the internet is a machine, a non-human user. And in the very early days of the internet, all of the users, or the vast majority of the users on the internet, they were humans. They were people communicating back and forth and creating web pages and sharing ideas and creative works. And as time has gone on, our devices have gotten more and more intelligent. And now most of the users on the internet today are not human beings. They're actually non-humans. They're machines. They're devices. Well, all of those non-human users, we talk about them collectively as the Internet of Things. And that's what we're going to be exploring today. And one important thing to keep in mind when we talk about smart devices or the Internet of Things or connected devices, when we talk about all of these non-human internet users, we're talking about something that is a trend. IoT isn't a product. You can't go to the store and buy it off the shelf. It's not made by any one particular company or organization or government agency. It's a trend, almost the same way that we've seen digital music become a trend. 20 years ago, it was very common if you wanted a new piece of music, you had to go out and buy something physical. You had to buy a CD or a cassette tape. Nowadays, if you want new music, you just go buy it online. You don't have to buy any kind of physical thing. Well, that move from a physical CD to getting your music online, that was a trend. And this is just like IoT is. So let's talk a little bit about what IoT is. As I just mentioned, it's any kind of non-human that's out there using the internet. But there are some types of devices we talk about a lot when we talk about IoT. And you've probably experienced some of these. You may even have some of these in your home. If you have an Amazon Echo or a Google Home device, then you've worked with IoT. If you're able to say, hey, Alexa, what's the weather going to be like today? Or when's the next time it's going to rain in my town? Or, hey, did my favorite team win the big game last night? Well, you're using an IoT device. Maybe you live in a smart city and your city is working on setting up some intelligent traffic lights. Traffic lights that don't change from green to red to yellow, back to green again on a fixed schedule, but traffic lights which can adjust that schedule depending on what's going around them. How much traffic is there, things like that. You may have some smart appliances in your life. Family members may have them. You might have some of these. You may have friends who have some of these. A smart watch, right, that can connect to your phone, tell you when you're getting an email or a text message. It can monitor how many steps you're taking and what your heartbeat is. Are you staying active? Are you getting a good workout? Lots of people right now with this outbreak of coronavirus are talking about, hey, how can we use these smart watches to maybe monitor people's temperature or look for possible symptoms? And wouldn't it be great if your watch could alert you if it thought maybe you'd been infected before you even knew it? Then you could start taking steps to get healthier and prevent other people from getting sick. The kitchen is an area in the house where a lot of IoT device makers are creating new and cool things. So in the coming years, we'll be seeing smart refrigerators. Imagine if your refrigerator just knew as soon as you were starting to run low on milk or cheese or carrots or any other of the foods that you like to keep. And as soon as your refrigerator saw you were running low on something, it was able to just go ahead and order some more for you. So you never had to remember when you were at the store, hey, do I need to get milk? Do we already have milk? I can't remember how much we have. Sometimes you go to the store and you buy a lot of things you don't need because you forgot you had some at home. Or sometimes you come home from the store and you realize that you completely forgot to buy more of something you were out of. So these intelligent kitchen appliances may be able to help you manage your shopping list and make sure you never run out of the food and the beverages that you like having the most. If you've got a printer or a scanner at home, well, most of the printers sold nowadays, you don't have to plug them into your computer. They connect to your Wi-Fi network. So any computer in the house, any smartphone, any tablet can go ahead and print out something right from the network without having to go over to the printer and plug anything in. Well, that's a great example of an IoT device or a smart device. Thermometers. We're seeing smart thermometers being used a lot in a hospital. We'll talk a little bit later, but healthcare and medicine is an area where these smart devices, where the world of IoT is really changing things very, very rapidly, especially with what's going on in the news right now. So imagine being able to take the temperature of a sick patient, but be able to do it from a safe distance and prevent any of the doctors or nursing staff that are treating that patient from potentially becoming infected themselves. We see a lot of robotics in factories. If you've ever seen any video clips of a car factory, how new cars are made, you'll see that there's a lot of robotic arms in there, putting the pieces together and welding different panels together. Human beings in an automotive factory like that are really just there to look over the machines and make sure the machines are functioning properly and troubleshooting any errors that come up. But the actual assembly of that new vehicle software updates that I need, just like your phone can update yourself with the latest software. Well, now things like your car are able to do that as well. So we could talk about an IoT device as being any machine, any non-human user, which is able to connect to the internet, to share information, to send information and receive information. We would also say that an IoT device is any machine that can do this automatically as part of its normal functioning. A human being doesn't have to come along anytime this device wants to go online or share information and connect it. That machine is able to do it yourself. So if you think about something like that Amazon Echo, that Alexa device, well, you maybe had to get it connected to your network when you first set it up. But once it's all set up and configured, you don't have to do anything else. It's just there. It knows how to connect to the internet. It knows how to find the information that you need. So these are IoT devices. And if we look at the different pieces of an IoT solution, There are generally three different major components. So on the device, we typically have sensors, some kind of way to collect information. So if we're talking about somebody's smartwatch, well, it's going to have a sensor on there. It's able to detect what your pulse rate is, and it might have another sensor that's able to detect your body temperature, and it might have a GPS sensor. So your phone, your smartwatch is able to show you directions. How do I get to the place that I'm trying to get? So the first big component of an IoT solution are the sensors. How do we capture the information we're going to work with? If we're talking about a smart refrigerator, how does that refrigerator actually know that you're running low on milk? What kind of sensors do we need to be able to capture that information? And that gets us to our second piece. Once all of our sensors have captured that information about the outside world, we need some processors. We need to figure out what to do with all that information that our sensors give us. For example, we might have some sensors in our smart refrigerator that tell us how full the bottle of milk is. Well, if that sensor checks to see how full the bottle is and the bottle is still 80% full, well, the processor has to decide, what do we do with that information? Do I need to order more milk? Do I need to alert my owner? Or can I just ignore that? And if the bottle of milk is mostly full, well, we probably don't need to alert anybody. We probably don't need to order any more milk. So it's the processors that are responsible for determining, what do we do with this sensor information? How do we act on it? Do we act on it at all? And then the third component, the part that really makes this a true IoT solution, is the networking component. How do these devices talk to each other? If your smart refrigerator can use sensors to see that the bottle of milk is empty, and it can use processors to determine, hey, that's a situation I should fix. I should alert my owner, or I should order some new milk for him or her. Well, that's not going to be possible unless that refrigerator can connect to a larger network. That refrigerator needs to be able to get on the internet. It needs to be able to order some more milk from your local grocery store, from Amazon, or from anybody else who might be able to bring you that milk that you need. And then, of course, you're going to need an internet connection. That's part of this networking piece. And that internet connection needs to give your device an IP address. This is just a unique address on the network. And this is so anything in the world can talk to your device, and that your device can talk to anything else. An IP address on the internet is almost exactly the same as the mailing address that your house has. If I want to send you a letter through the mail, I have to know what your address is. I can't just write on the envelope, it's the third blue house on the second street over by the park. The mail carrier isn't going to know how to deliver that letter. So just like every house or building in the real world has an address, so we can send messages to it or receive messages from it, everything on the internet has to have an address, and we call that an IP address. Well, those are the main components, or the required components of a solution. Then there's some other technologies that we don't have to make it an IoT solution, but we oftentimes see as being pieces of IoT solutions. Things like artificial intelligence. If we have this smart device or smart devices and they're collecting all of this information, well, sometimes it's helpful to have some AI to go through all of that large information, that large data set that we've collected. So maybe we'd want to collect information about all of the smart refrigerators, in all of the milk levels, in all of the refrigerators, because we could look at that big data set and we could tell, are people drinking more milk than usual or less milk than usual? And we may use that data to go do other things. If we notice that everybody's drinking more milk than they usually do, well, we may want to tell the farmers and ranchers that. We may want to tell them, hey, you guys may need to get more milk from those cows than you usually get because people are drinking more of it. Or, hey, you may want to not milk those cows as much because people aren't drinking as much milk as they used to. We talked yesterday about blockchain. Blockchain shows up a lot in IoT solutions. And if you were with us yesterday, remember, one of the great things about blockchain is it's a good method for storing our most important data. If you were with us yesterday, we talked about, hey, when you have really important data you really need to protect, or data that's very, very important, you don't just store it in one place, you store it in many places. And that way, if anything happens to one of the copies, that's okay. You've got some backups. Well, if we need to safely and securely store and manage this data that we're getting from our smart devices, a blockchain can be a good way to do that. We also oftentimes see virtual reality or augmented reality as part of an IoT solution. You can look at this little picture down at the bottom right, and a lot of smartphones are doing this now. You ask for directions. Hey, how do I walk from my hotel to this restaurant down the street? And a lot of smartphones now will let you turn on the camera, and you can actually see right on your screen what the camera is seeing, and also see instructions laid on top of it. Hey, turn left here. Hey, there's a pharmacy over here if you need to buy some more mouthwash, things like that. So lots of virtual reality, augmented reality that goes along with IoT, as well as blockchain and AI. So if you start playing with these smart devices or designing your own IoT solutions, you're probably going to get to work with some of these other technologies too. And that's a really cool thing. So let's talk a little bit about the history of IoT, because this is an idea that has been slowly unfolding for the last 50 years. And it's a very, very interesting history because IoT didn't start until a few different components came together. So like I said, all of this started 50 years ago in Scotland. There were some retired electronics engineers, and they just had so much fun working with electronics, they weren't ready to retire. So they got together and they started their own little company called Pico Electronics. And they were just designing interesting electronic items, consumer products, just because that's what these people love to do. And in 1974, Pico Electronics designed a record player. It was called the AccuTrack 4000. You can see a picture of it here. And what made AccuTrack such an amazing device is it was a remote control record player. You could start a record playing, you could stop it, you could pause it, you could turn the volume up or down, you could skip over a song or go back to a song. You could even create your own playlists from a record player. Really, really amazing things to be able to do in 1974. And this AccuTrack record player was actually the world's very first remote control consumer device. So nowadays we're pretty used to it. If you go home and you want to turn on the TV, well, you find the remote, right? And you hit the button on the remote. Well, in 1974, this was brand new. And this record player was the very first thing in the house that you didn't have to stand up and walk over to it if you wanted to change some of the settings. The year after that, in 1975, Pico Electronics starts something called the X10 project. And you can still learn about this today. People still use X10 all over the place. But what they did is they expanded this idea of the record player. And the X10 was a way that you could control different parts of your house with a remote control. People liked being able to use a remote control on their record player so much, they asked Pico Electronics to build other remote control things. And so Pico started this X10 project, and they created lamp switches and wall switches and appliance switches. So now you could use their remote control, and you could use that remote control to turn the lights in the upstairs bedroom on or off, or to turn the coffee maker in the kitchen on or off, or to turn the Christmas lights outside on or off. So now remote control devices are really starting to get popular. So this was the 1970s. Now we get into the 1980s. And what was really big about the 1980s is we started the decade with computers being almost nowhere, and we ended the decade with computers being everywhere. This is when we saw the birth of the personal computer, or the PC revolution. Now, all of a sudden, up till this point, most people never even worked with a computer. And if you did work with a computer, you probably worked with it at the office, or maybe you were a university student and you got to use some of the university's computers. But unless you were just an extremely wealthy person, it was unheard of at the time for someone to have a computer in their home, to have their own personal computer. Well, that all changed in the 80s. And we saw things like the Commodore 64 and the Apple II and all of the DOS PCs show up. And now it became very, very common for people to have a computer in their home. And the reason why this was so important to the IoT world is many of these computers came with a serial port, or an RS-232 port. And this was just a 9-pin port on the back of the computer. You can see a little picture of it here on the right. And this RS-232, this serial port interface, this was a standard interface. You could find it on just about all of the computers of that era. And anywhere you saw this, this serial port, this RS-232 port, it was all the same. It was a standard. So if you found it on one brand of computer and then you saw it on another brand, it would work the same way. It would have the same number of pins. Those pins would do the same thing. And so this created a standard that people could use to go build their own cables to plug into this port and connect to anything. And so in the 80s, you see a lot of technology enthusiasts building their own cables to plug into this port so they could use their computer to control anything around them. It was around this time that something called the CP290 module was released. And this let your computer control all the same things in your home that X10 lets you control with a remote. So now, not only can you turn the bedroom lights upstairs on and off with a remote, you can have your computer do it as well. And if your computer can do it, that means you can write a program. You can put some intelligence behind those actions. So you could write a computer program which says, I only want those bedroom lights to come on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. On Sundays, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, I don't want the lights to come on at all. And then in 1982, we actually have the world's first IoT device, the first time that we had something on the internet, the very early internet, that wasn't a human being. And it was a Coke machine. It was a vending machine. Some students at Carnegie Mellon University thought it would be a really cool idea to put some sensors inside of a Coke machine. And that way they could tell how many of each kind of drink was in the machine and what the temperature was. So that way, before you got up and you walked all the way across the building to go get a drink, well, maybe you had your heart set on an ice cold Sprite. Well, you could check and make sure that, hey, does the vending machine even have Sprite? And if it does, is it cold or is it still warm? Did it just get put in? And you can actually go online. You can see this vending machine today. It's actually still online. It was the first and the oldest internet connected appliance or IoT device. And then the other thing that happens throughout the 80s is these things we called BBSs or bulletin board services get very popular. And remember, in this time, there was no internet. There was no global network for computers. So bulletin board services, BBSs, these were just small local networks. So one of the first ones was set up in Chicago. And after that, one got set up in San Francisco and one got set up in New York. And these were just like little mini internets, internets just for your city or your local area. You'd use a dial-up modem to dial into them, and then you could have chats. You could share files. You could share anything you wanted with other people in your city or your local community. And so people not only had computers in their home, and they could not only connect these computers to physical devices around them, but now we're connecting these computers to other computers and building networks. We're laying the groundwork for what would eventually become the internet as we know it today. In 1991, another famous device goes online. This was at USC University Cambridge University. It was the Trojan coffee pot. It was a lot like the Coke machine. It was a way that people could see, hey, is there still coffee in the coffee maker before I get up and walk over there? And now in the 90s, everyone is getting online. The internet becomes a thing. And towards the end of the 90s in 1999, that's when we first start talking about the Internet of Things. And actually at that time, we called it the Internet for Things. But that's where IoT and smart devices first started getting talked about. In the early 2000s, now everyone's got a PC at home and broadband access becomes a thing. We no longer have to dial up and have slow internet through the phone line. And really in 2008, 2009, that's when IoT begins. That's finally the time where we have more non-human users on the internet than we do human users. And today, as I mentioned, most of the users on the internet are non-human. They're machines, they're devices. So IoT is really, really taken off. So what do we use IoT for? What's some of the cool things that it's doing for us? Well, I mentioned we have wearables. We have things like smart watches. The new Apple Watch, when it came out, was in the news because it can monitor a person's heartbeat. And if it detects an abnormal heartbeat, it can alert medical authorities. It can call 911 for you. And that feature has already saved a few people's lives who were starting to suffer from a heart attack or another kind of coronary event. And that Apple Watch detected it. And it was able to reach out and get help for that person before that person even knew that they were having a serious medical event. And we're seeing this trend in wearable continue. So now there's smart clothing, smart hats, smart shoes, smart socks that can help monitor your body in different conditions. If you're an athlete, you're training for an event, some of this smart clothing can make sure that you're training, doing the best training possible. We see these kind of devices in our home, thermostats and doorbells, kitchen appliances like that smart refrigerator, web cameras and security cameras. You can be away from home now and you can pull out your phone and check all the cameras around your house and make sure that your pets are doing good or that no water pipes have broken while you're gone or anything like that. And we have our voice assistants, our Google Home, our Alexas, our Siris, these connected devices that we can just talk to. We don't have to sit down and type and look at a screen. This is really handy if we're busy doing something else, if we're already using our hands to work on something, but we want to get some information or send some information online. We also see these types of devices being used a lot for caring for the elderly, making sure that they can still live independently, but they can do that safely. This little cartoon shows a great example. We might have an elderly person here, and they've got a smart watch, and they've got some cameras in their home. And you can see this older woman, she suffers a fall. So when she falls down, maybe that watch is able to detect, hey, there was a really big impact. She might have fallen down. Maybe those video cameras can confirm, yep, we can look at the footage and we can see that she actually did fall down, and she may not be able to get to a phone and call for help. So we can detect this event, and we can go ahead and alert people. We might alert this older woman's daughter or granddaughter. Hey, your grandmother's fallen, and we're going to get some help to her, but we just wanted to let you know. And then they can send an ambulance out to go check on her and make sure she's okay. This is a great way for older people to be able to still live in their homes and live an independent life and not have to go into nursing care. But we can still keep track of them and make sure they're healthy and make sure that they get any help if they need it. Things like hearing aids are really cool. So maybe you have an older person with a hearing aid. Well, being able just to put different sounds into that hearing aid. Maybe they're in another room down in the basement and they don't hear the phone ringing upstairs. Well, if they have that hearing aid in, maybe we can just play a little ringtone in the hearing aid so they know to go upstairs and answer the phone. We see these smart devices in our consumer life. Car insurance companies have really latched onto this. And a lot of car insurance companies now will give you, or might be willing to give you, a cheaper car insurance rate if you plug a device like this into your car. A device that monitors how you drive. Are you a safe, careful driver? Are you a reckless driver? Are you someone who obeys the speed limit? Are you someone who doesn't obey the speed limit? Well, we can use a device like this to capture a bunch of information about what kind of driver you are. And if you're a safe driver, we could give you a lower car insurance rate than if you're an unsafe driver. Health insurance companies are looking at doing the same thing. Hey, if members of my health insurance company all have a smart watch and I can monitor their heart rate and how active they are, well, that means I might give lower insurance rates to people that are healthy and active and taking good care of themselves. They're less likely to get sick. So I don't need to charge them as much money. The people who aren't being healthy, well, they may pay a little bit higher rate. Well, all of this is only possible if we have that smart device to collect that kind of information in the first place. Medicine and healthcare, we see a lot of these smart devices. This is sometimes talked about as IOT, or the Internet of Medical Things. We can have smart devices to measure someone's heart rate, their blood pressure, their blood sugar. So if you're diabetic, you may be able to just check your blood sugar levels, your insulin levels right on your phone. A lot easier than how people with those conditions had to monitor their blood sugar before. We might be able to send emergency notifications. Right? Think about when grandma slipped and fell here. Well, we can also notify doctors for other things. Maybe we notice that somebody's heart rate is getting unusually high or unusually low, that their blood pressure is dropping very, very quickly. These devices might be able to notify doctors or nurses or other people who can jump in and provide assistance and care. Ambulance routing. Maybe you're an ambulance driver and you go pick up a patient, and you might not know exactly what's wrong with that patient. You just got the call that someone needs an ambulance right away. So you get there and you pick up the patient, and once you learn a little bit about what's wrong with the patient, you might decide to take that patient to one hospital over another. For example, maybe you have to go pick up a patient because they're having a heart attack or a stroke. And once you get there, you realize that's what's going on. This person is having a heart attack. Well, you may put them in the ambulance, and the ambulance may tell you to go to hospital B instead of hospital A because hospital B has better cardiologists, better heart doctors than hospital A. Hospital A is a better hospital if someone gets sick with the flu or pneumonia. So we can start directing patients to different care facilities based on the kind of treatment that they need. Diagnostic support systems helping doctors diagnose a patient. So if a patient comes into an emergency room and they fill out the form or they talk to a nurse and they list all the symptoms that they're having, well, maybe the doctor could get some help diagnosing that condition, and maybe come up with a correct diagnosis a little bit more often. And then if we have all of these smart devices collecting information about patients and their health and their medical conditions, well, now we can start to talk about different trends. And this is critically important right now as we fight the coronavirus outbreak. The more information that we can share, the more effective our responses can be. If we can collect this kind of information from patients, we can start to see, hey, are there parts of the country or parts of the world where cases are increasing or decreasing? Do we see cases increasing faster in hot climates or cold climates? Things like that. So we can start to give people better advice as we learn more and more along the way. There are a lot of business uses for this technology. Smart traffic lights and signals, collecting automatic tolls, finding parking spaces. So think about if maybe you could pay your city or your state a fee, maybe let's say $50 a month. But if you pay that $50 a month, anytime your car drives up to a red light, it automatically turns green. If you don't want to pay the money, you might just have to keep sitting there at the red light until it turns green. We might be able to do things like this with our traffic signals. If you've ever taken a toll road, you probably notice that nowadays you just drive right through the toll station. Well, in the old days, it didn't used to be like that. In the old days, you came to the toll station and you had to stop. And there was someone in the toll booth and you had to pay them the money, the toll. And if you got any change, they'd give you your change and then you could keep going. Well, nowadays you don't even have to stop. As soon as you drive through that toll station, it takes the money out of your account automatically. And so now we can get to where we're trying to get to a lot faster. Maybe you have a new car. And your car is able to use GPS to see where it is in the world. And then once it knows where it is in the world, it has an internet connection. So it can go check and see, hey, what's the weather like where I'm at right now? And wouldn't it be kind of cool if your car could automatically turn on traction control or four-wheel drive if it looked in the weather forecast and it saw that it was supposed to snow? So it could go ahead and make some of those decisions for you. And right now, people are looking at using this technology a lot with cars. So there's a big area in IoT called V2X, vehicle to something, right? We can have vehicle-to-vehicle communications, cars talking to other cars. Let's say you're driving down the highway, and all of a sudden, the car in front of you slams on its brakes really quickly. But what if as soon as that driver in front of you hits the brakes, that car in front of you told all the cars around it, hey, my brakes are on. Well, your car might be able to get that message and apply your brakes and start slowing down faster than you can react and keep you a little bit safer. And that's only possible if cars can talk to other cars. There's also V to I, vehicle to infrastructure. This is cars communicating with the world around them. So I'm from Denver, Colorado. That's where I'm at right now. And the city of Denver has been looking at testing smart devices to help accomplish this kind of thing. One of the ideas they asked people in the city of Denver, how come you don't ride the bus more? What would it take for you to ride the bus more, to take the bus to work every morning? And one of the things people said when they got asked that question was, hey, I would love to ride the bus, but it takes too long. The bus is always stopping. If I drive my car, I don't have to stop. I just go right from home to my office. And the city said, how can we fix that? And one of the ideas they came up with is, well, what if we put a GPS tracking device on all of our city buses and we have some intelligent traffic lights? And anytime a city bus is coming up to a traffic light, we'll just turn it green, or if it's already green, we'll make sure it stays green until the bus goes through. And that way, if you ride the bus to work, you never get stuck at a red light. So there's some really cool things that cities can start to do to help the environment or to make life easier on its citizens. But that's only possible if vehicles can talk to the rest of the city. And we also have vehicle to pedestrian. Vehicles talking to pedestrians or people out on the street, people riding their bike or walking along the sidewalk. Imagine your friend tells you about a great new album. You got to go check out this album. You're going to love it. So you're walking down the street and you're checking out this new album. You've got your headphones or your earbuds in. You're just enjoying this album that your friend told you about. Maybe you're not paying attention and you step out into the street. You don't notice a car headed right towards you. Well, if that car can communicate with your smartphone, with your headphones, maybe you're not looking, but maybe you can hear in your headphones a voice saying, hey, watch out, watch your step, stop, there's a car. And you could get a warning there in your headphones before that car ran you over. So all of these vehicle technologies, vehicle to infrastructure, vehicle to pedestrian, these are all very, very important technologies to have in place as we keep working on self-driving cars. We're going to need all of these different technologies in place before cars can actually drive themselves. There are a lot of business uses. How do we keep our office buildings secure and safe? How do we minimize the amount of energy that they're consuming? Can our buildings tell us when it's time for maintenance? Can a light bulb tell me when it's starting to go out before it actually has? So I can get someone to go repair or replace that light bulb before it goes out. Can my building tell me when the women's bathroom on the 3rd floor is starting to run low on soap? That way I can make sure that someone goes and refills the soap dispenser before it's empty. I can have a much nicer building for people to work in. And I can have buildings which don't consume as much energy, which automatically know to turn the lights off when the last person leaves the room, or to turn the lights on when someone walks in. And that way we don't have as big an environmental impact from these buildings. A lot of people are using IoT in manufacturing, making sure that people stay safe. How long have my employees in my factory been working? Are they tired? Are they sick? Are they feeling distracted or stressed out? I can also use this technology to help take care of the equipment in my factories. Is it time to do some maintenance? Is it time to replace a belt? Do I need to change the oil on a certain piece of equipment? And I can use this technology to make sure that everybody's working safe. Are they following all the rules and safety procedures? Are there any dangerous conditions that people are having to work in? Do we need to go back and change any of our rules or policies to protect anyone from a dangerous situation. Farming and agriculture, being able to inspect your crops and analyze your soil and tell whether food might be contaminated or unsafe to eat before somebody gets sick from it. And smart cities, being able to control the city around you. For example, there's a city called Santander in Spain, which is doing some really cool things with IOT. And one of those is you can use your smartphone to find a parking spot. So say you're driving into town. Well, you could just pull up an app on your phone and you could say, hey, I'm going to the convention center. And your phone will look at where you are and how close you are to the convention center. And when you start to get close, your phone can help you find a parking spot. It can reserve that parking spot and tell anyone who tries to park there, hey, I'm holding this for someone else. I'm holding it for you. And that way, when you finally get downtown, you just pull into the spot that's being reserved for you and you park your car. You don't have to waste time and gas driving around looking for an open parking spot. A lot of things that can just make life in a city easier. Dubai, the city of Dubai, over in the United Arab Emirates, is working on a lot of these smart city technologies. And they're able to have it so that you can do anything you need to do with the city right on your phone. You never have to go into a government office. So if you need to get your driver's license renewed, well, you can just do that right from your smartphone. If you need to make an appointment with somebody in the government, you can do that right from your smartphone. You never have to go to an office and stand in line and wait. They're looking at using these devices to control their public transportation system. For example, if nobody's waiting at the bus stop, then let's just skip that bus stop. If nobody's waiting to ride the bus, then the bus doesn't need to go to that stop. Controlling energy usage, making sure that we're not using too much energy. Helping to move power to where we need it the most. And a real big one, monitoring our environment. How clean is our air? How clean is our water? How clean is our soil? Can we use different sensors and smart devices to predict when certain events might be coming, like an earthquake or a tsunami? That way we can give people more advance warning and they have a little bit more time to make sure that they're safe and secure and that their loved ones are safe and secure. And finally, the military is very interested in these smart devices. In anything that they can do to keep from having to put a human being out on the battlefield. If we break a machine, if a machine gets destroyed, that's okay. We can build another one, but we can't do that with a human being. So the more that we can keep people out of harm's way, the better. If you think you have a good idea for how you can use some of this technology in the military, the government right now is a $25 million grant. That means the government might give you a few $1 million if you come up with a great idea to actually go out and build it. So all this sounds real great, but what could go wrong? Are there concerns? Are there problems? Are there things we need to be worried about? And the answer is yes, there are some things. IoT is great, but we do need to keep in mind that there are some risks to it. One of the very first risks that we hit was in addressing. If you remember, back at the beginning of this class, I said everything on the internet has to have a unique address, just like every building has a unique address. Well, as soon as we started adding all of these smart devices online, we ran out, or we realized we were going to run out of addresses. So we had to come up with longer addresses. So we don't worry about that too much today. Bandwidth is another. These smart devices generate a lot of information and they need a lot of bandwidth to communicate back and forth. Right now, most of our mobile networks are 4G and they're just not fast enough to be able to send all the data back and forth that these smart devices need to send. So now we're in the process of replacing our 4G mobile internet with 5G mobile internet. Mobile internet that can be 1,000 times faster than what you're used to today. So hopefully in the coming years, we won't have to worry about bandwidth. But for right now, this is still a concern because most areas are still 4G. And probably one of the biggest concerns is privacy. If smart devices are out there collecting all of this data, that's a great thing. But are we comfortable with all of the data that they're collecting? Are there parts of my life that I want to keep private? Earlier this year, there were a couple airlines that were in the news, American Airlines and Singapore Air, because some customers noticed that in the in-seat entertainment system, there was a tiny little web camera. And nobody was sure if it was being used or how it was being used. And passengers on these airlines were concerned that maybe the airline was spying on them. They weren't comfortable with that. So we need to make sure that we're respecting people's privacy and we're being very honest about the data that we're collecting. And if we're building these smart devices, we need to make sure that they're secure, that it's not easy for a hacker to get into these devices and use them to spy on people and violate their privacy. We also need to keep these devices secure because if a hacker gets a hold of them, there could be some really bad things that happen. Imagine if a hacker was able to change all of the stoplights in your town from green to red. Well, you might have a traffic jam that looks something like this. Imagine if a hacker was able to get a hold of your smart refrigerator and have your smart refrigerator place an order for 100,000 gallons of milk because it thought you were running low. Some of these events would be very inconvenient, and other events like this might be very, very dangerous. So we need to make sure that if we're working with these devices, if we're designing these devices, that we're always keeping security in mind. And there was a great story, if you want to learn more about some of the risks. Back in 2015, Wired magazine hired some hackers to follow them around in a brand new Jeep Cherokee. And these hackers were trying to see what they could do remotely. And they were able to shut down the car, crank up the radio, lock the driver in so they couldn't unlock the doors. And all of this resulted in a very expensive and embarrassing recall for Jeep. So a good story there if you're interested in learning more about some of the things that can go wrong with these smart devices if we don't pay enough attention to security. But don't let all that fear hold you back, because it is really easy to get started in IoT, and there's a lot you can do. And there are just a lot of cool things you can build when you connect the devices around you in everyday life to a computer, to something you can program. So if you want to get started in IoT, you only need 3 things. The first thing you need is an internet connection. The second thing you need is a device to work with. And the third thing you need is an idea. What are you going to build? So hopefully you guys all have an internet connection. If you didn't, you wouldn't be able to be watching this right now. And that internet connection is important for 2 reasons. If you don't have an internet connection, you don't have an IoT device. It's got to be able to connect to the internet. The other reason that internet connection is so important is so you can go out and Google things, because I can pretty much guarantee you, no matter what type of IoT device you want to go design or build or play with, it's almost a guarantee that you are not the first person to have that idea, that you are not the first person to try it. And so if you get stuck, if you have questions, if you're looking for some guidance, Google can be a great way to go learn from the people who've tried it before you. Next, you're going to need a device to get started with. And one of the best devices to get started with is a Raspberry Pi, a tiny little computer. This is about the size of a credit card. And they're very, very low-cost devices, typically anywhere from $10 to about $35 or $40. This is just a tiny little computer on a chip. I can plug in a keyboard and a mouse and a monitor to this and use it just like any computer. But what makes these really interesting, I'll zoom in and see if you can see them. You see all these pins across the top. And these are called GPIO pins, general purpose input and output. And you can use a Raspberry Pi to control all of these pins. And you can take any kind of device in the world and build an interface, build a cable to plug into it with these pins. So I can use this little tiny computer to control anything I plug into it. So here's a little illustration. You can see an example where someone's wired up just a tiny little LED light, and they can write a program to flash this light to turn it on or off. And the sky's the limit with this. So this can be a really, really good tool to get started with. And then finally, you're going to need an idea. What are you going to go out and build? What is it you want to create? What is it you think would be better if we could make it an IoT solution? Once you've got those components, you're going to need a few skills in order to put this all together. Probably the biggest skill that you'll need is to be comfortable with computer programming or software development. If you've never done any computer programming or you want to learn, you're in luck, because tomorrow, that's exactly what we're going to be talking about. So if you come back here, same time, same place tomorrow, we're going to be talking about the basics of computer programming, all the concepts you need to know to get started. You can also check out w3schools.com online. This is a really, really great way to get started programming, because you can pick the technology you want to learn, and then you get a bunch of very, very small bite-sized exercises that you can do here in the browser. So for example, I could say, you know what, I want to learn JavaScript. So let me start off with the introduction. And then I can go through these lessons. So here it teaches me about the where to tag. And I can go ahead and try it myself. I can change the code here and I can run it. I can see the result that I get. So this is a really, really great resource, w3schools.com. And if you go there to start learning how to program because you want to build an IoT device, you should probably start with one of these three languages. You could start with JavaScript, and JavaScript is a great language to learn for your first programming language because it's the world's most popular programming language. And you can use JavaScript not just for building IoT solutions, but for doing anything on the web. So if you want to build your own website, you can do that in JavaScript. Another good choice is Microsoft.NET, languages like C# or Visual Basic. If you're a Windows PC user, Microsoft.NET, their libraries have a lot of built-in functions to connect to and control external devices. And Python is another very, very popular language for IoT solutions and interfacing with electronic devices. So any one of these languages, if you have never done any coding or development, would be a really, really good place to start. You might also need to know a little bit about networking. How does IP addressing work? How do I make sure that different devices on a network can talk to each other? How do I configure my network so devices on one network can talk to devices on another network and jump from network to network? So you may want to study a little bit about networking. And then if you're going to take something like a Raspberry Pi and use these pins to connect to your own device to make your own interface, well, you may need to understand a little bit about electronics, wiring, and using a voltmeter and soldering connections together. This may be a great thing to team up on. Maybe if you've got a friend who's really interested in computers, but you're really interested in electronics, you could come up with an idea together. And you could tell your friend, hey, you handle all the programming and the computer side of it, and I'll handle the electronic side, getting everything wired up and connected. So that's it. Hopefully that got you excited about IoT, about Internet of Things, and got you excited to jump in and learn a little bit more. If you're excited about IoT or anything that we've talked about, just go ahead and jump on in. Now is a really, really great time. And there are so many good resources online, not just the ones on this slide, but all over the internet that you can learn from. And if you really found this interesting and you want to learn more, let us know. We would love to start doing more of these technology for kids classes. So if you might be interested in diving deeper into IoT, going through a class where you build your own project and write your own code, let us know. And if there are enough people interested in that, we'd love to put together a course for you guys. So thanks for joining us. Appreciate you guys making some time today. And like I said, if you're interested in learning more about coding and programming and development, be sure to join us here, same time, same place tomorrow, because that's what we're going to be talking about. And that could be a great way to jump into IoT and get your feet wet. So hopefully I'll see you guys tomorrow, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Stay safe and stay healthy, everyone.